Hello and welcome to another episode of Video Game Film School, the show that explores the connection between video games and the films that influence them. In this episode, I will discuss Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. In recent years, the Resident Evil franchise seems to have lost its way. The first 4 titles were hallmarks of the survival horror genre, but as the series went on, later entries moved away from its core survival element and focused more on action. Fans of the franchise claimed the series had lost its way, especially with the 5th and 6th installment. Fortunately, it appears that Capcom heard the critics and returned the series back to its survival horror roots. Resident Evil 7 features a modern look and playstyle, borrowing aspects from not only modern horror games, but classic horror cinema. Resident Evil 7's story focuses on Ethan, an everyman with a little backstory as he searches for his missing wife Mia. The search leads him to a derelict plantation deep within the bayous of Louisiana. The plantation is inhabited by the Baker family, who have transformed into cannibalistic mutants that stalk and terrorize Ethan as he explores through the estate. The game has its roots in Southern Gothic horror, with themes of deeply flawed and disturbing characters, decayed setting, grotesque situations, and other sinister events surrounding alienation and violence. In Deliverance, a group of Atlanta city slickers take a canoe trip into the heart of northern Georgia, only to be mutilated and terrorized by inbred locals. They realize that they have wandered into a part of the country that they do not recognize or understand. Resident Evil 7 uses this approach, putting Ethan in a setting that is completely isolated from the outside world. He realizes that he is lost, being hunted, and nobody's coming to help him. True Detective Season 1 influenced Resident Evil's grotesque setting through its many unsettling depictions of backwoods Louisiana. True Detective's location and characters had a hint of something evil and sinister festering beneath the surface, comparable to how you feel exploring the Baker estate. The most apparent link Resident Evil 7 has to Southern Gothic horror is the iconic 1974 picture, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In the film, a group of young adults on a road trip through rural Texas get led to slaughter by a family of cannibal rednecks residing in an isolated, decrepit house. The sickly yellow color palette, idols made of human bones, comatose family members in wheelchairs, and an unstable family unit are all things in the game borrowed from the film. The Bakers have a chaotic and manic way about them, strikingly similar to the family in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The Baker family dinner scene in the opening portions of the game was borrowed almost entirely from the film and is used to introduce you to the warped psychopaths you'd be trying to escape from. The Baker residence is not a welcoming place. Walls are crusted in grime and rust, tables overflow with rotting food, and insects cover the walls and floors. The Baker estate's interior is a clear inspiration to the film 7, which uses its crime scenes as a glimpse into the madness of the killer John Doe. The Gluttony House, with rotting food, grease and grime covering the floor and walls, pots and pans of vomit, and God knows what else. The Sloth House, with pine fresheners littering the ceiling, and John Doe's apartment, littered with iconography, filled with journals and newspaper clippings pinned to walls. Both game and film use environmental storytelling to put you on edge and give you an idea of the horror you're about to uncover. At first glance, the Baker family gives you the impression that they are your generic, happy redneck cannibal family. But the game turns this trope on its head as you discover the mystery of the Baker residence. You learn that at one point the Bakers were a normal family. Their madness began when a government freighter crashed into their property, carrying a deadly virus that mutated the Bakers into the sinister, flesh-loving murderers that you meet at the dinner table. A normal town where residents go crazy due to a top-secret government virus can also be seen in the film The Crazies, where a town experiences mass mania after the government accidentally releases a deadly virus on its population. The virus's carrier, Evelyn, is a bioorganic weapon capable of infecting people with a mold which gives her control over her victims' minds. Movies such as Firestarter and Ringu inspired Evelyn's look and power. Firestarter is the story of a girl with the telekinetic powers to start fires with her mind. The film inspired Evelyn's backstory of being stuck in a situation where she is being used as a bioweapon by the government. Ringu's now iconic creepy little girl motif influenced the look of Evelyn, as well as influencing the way Mia crawled around at the beginning of the game. It's worth mentioning the use of mysterious videotapes in both Ringu and RE7. Throughout the campaign, you find videotapes, which gives you hints and clues of secrets within the house. It's a look into the past to prepare you for the future. The cursed tape in Ringu has the same function, as both contain clues for the protagonist to decipher in order to move the plot forward. The videotapes in Resident Evil 7 are shot in an amateur shaky cam fashion, originally popularized by the Fox documentary The Blair Witch Project. The first tape you find features two filmmakers and a cameraman, controlled by you, searching the Baker Mansion, recording their own reality TV show. Just as in the Blair Witch Project, things go awry in the mansion, culminating in the three filmmakers' deaths, echoing the film's ending. The family's patriarch, Jack Baker, takes inspiration from the character Jack Torrance from The Shining. In the Resident Evil 7 development documentary series, the game's scenario director explains, "The Shining is a big inspiration for me. In fact, the two Jacks in the film, where Jack Nicholson plays Jack Torrance, are why I chose the name Jack Baker. Besides the crazy hair and the propensity to break through walls, they wanted to make Jack Baker like Torrance, a family man whose rage was rooted in a twisted sense of paternal responsibility, as well as the influence of dangerous outside forces." Other members of the Baker family have their roots in horror cinema. The matriarch, Marguerite Baker, of all the Baker family, has the most inhuman characteristics. She can crawl on walls and has the ability to control mutant insects. Her bug motif can be seen as an influence to David Cronenberg's The Fly, as she has the most physical change in her appearance. Her mutated lower abdomen becomes a swollen insect hive, which looks comparable to the mother's mutation in another Cronenberg film, The Brood. The Baker's son Lucas is very intelligent but also deeply disturbed even before the appearance of Evelyn.
Jack and Marguerite Baker. And they were quiet, not backward. A lot of bad rumors about their son Lucas. Bad seed, apparently.
He traps his victims and puts them through a sort of torture puzzle, an obvious reference to the movie Saw. He even references the torture puzzle as a game.
What do you say we play a little game?
I want to play a game.
There is even a creepy clown dummy akin to the one in Saw. Besides Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the film most often mentioned when talking about Resident Evil 7's influences are Evil Dead 1 and 2. Both films are known for their over-the-top gore, dark, campy humor, and great use of setting, all of which the game features so well. All the action in The Evil Dead takes place in one location, a cabin isolated deep in the woods. The developers took this intimate setting and used it as a blueprint for the game. The gore and violence in Evil Dead is done in a way that is campy and almost slapstick. Characters get their limbs lopped off and beaten to a pulp, but still come back swinging. In the story, Mia, infected by the molded, goes in and out of being her normal self and a possessed homicidal demon. She attacks and terrorizes Ethan just as Ash's girlfriend does while being possessed by the demons in the film. Ethan, like Ash, also loses his hand by a chainsaw. Other references to Evil Dead are spread throughout the game, such as Ethan's car being the same car as Ash's in the film, a note found in the woods that says, "Join us," a line repeated by the demons in Evil Dead 1, and the fight scene between Jack as he picks up a chainsaw and says the line, which is the classic line said by Ash as he attaches a chainsaw to a severed limb in Evil Dead 2. Finally, the monster design and even the house itself takes a page out of the body horror genre. The Thing is a masterwork in the horror and paranoia of facing the unknown in an isolated setting. Deep in Antarctica, an alien takes control of living creatures and tries to mimic the body, which in turn mutates the host into grotesque monstrosities. The gross mutation of Jack by the molded shares similarities to the character's mutations in The Thing. The first time you fight Jack, you start seeing huge fleshy boils and extra eyes appearing all over his body, till eventually by the last Jack boss fight, his body has morphed completely into a giant eye-filled blob. The final boss with Evelyn has the same scenario where she is transfigured into a gigantic mold behemoth. The molded bacteria acts as a fungus that spreads, infects, and mutates not only its victims, but the habitat it's spreading in. As you play, the house keeps getting more and more covered with black mold. The mold is forming a habitat similar to Aliens, in which the space station the xenomorphs take over become more and more grown over. Towards the game's finale, Mia has to free Ethan from a mold cocoon, similar to the cocoons the xenomorphs trap their victims in. David Cronenberg's The Fly influenced the mutations of the infected molded creatures. The molded is a virus that changes your DNA, morphing you into another being entirely. The Fly's use of makeup showed the complete deterioration of a man as his DNA changes into a housefly. You see the viral effects in Lucas, Marguerite, Jack, and other victims in different states of transformation. The disgusting depiction of this metamorphosis of Jeff Goldblum changing into a fly influenced the look of Resident Evil 7's enemies. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard is a triumphant revival of the Resident Evil franchise. Capcom, inspired by the themes found in classic horror cinema, seems to have taken the series back to its survival horror roots.
She'll run to him like he's the one. His arms outstretched, but